I was someone who never played on any youth national teams at all, to quickly becoming a star in the MLS, an all-star, and then on to the full national team, really all because of this new training kind of concept that I had created. There's a few things that are definitely happening in a big way, right? There's a tremendous amount of investment now going into youth sports, right?
Apparently you tried to take free kicks off David Beckham. He just wouldn't let you take one. Like,
I'd also say, although if there were 100 elements of becoming a good footballer, in 99 of them, I was nowhere near, the David Beckhams of the world, but I would say I could cross the ball as well as probably anybody in the world with my left foot. And obviously that has a big impact on being a good free kick taker as well. We're actively in the market for partnerships. We're looking for new investment ideas. We're kind of on the front foot of most of the new tech that's being developed. The opportunity to be a part of the team in 2002 really made it to the quarterfinals, which was the furthest the U.S. team has ever made it, and certainly to play a role and an important role in that process was something I'll always hold dear to my heart. And I'm looking forward to the U.S. surpassing us this year, I hope, but we'll see. The competition gets tougher and tougher every World Cup.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new season of the SportsTech All-Stars Podcast. We are kicking off our spring lineup with quite a heavy hitter. This week we have Eddie Lewis, the founder and president of TOCA Football, a company that has raised over $200 million to deliver tech-enabled training and social experiences in football or soccer. Eddie made the transition to entrepreneurship after a 14-year career as a pro footballer, which included 82 caps for the US men's national team and appearances at 2 World Cups, stints in the Premier League with Leeds United and Derby County, and a spell at LA Galaxy where he played with my personal favorite footballer growing up, David Beckham. Eddie shares the brilliant story of how practicing secretly with a tennis ball machine actually led him to starting TOCA Football, and now how the company is expanding in various markets, especially the US and the UK. So a fascinating episode. Hope you enjoyed. Here's former US men's national team player and founder of TOCA Football, Eddie Lewis. Eddie, I have to start with TOCA. But before I get there, I want to give a little segue to our audience, because you bring into this experience of founding a company that you've been at the helm of for about 16 years now. So it's no mean feat, right? But you bring an illustrious professional career into this platform that you've built. Two parts to this question. First, over the last 16 years, how has TOCA Football evolved in your eyes? Like, where did you start and where is it now? And part B, how much of your playing career impacted the product that you were trying to build and also the journey that it's been on for the last 16 years?
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks, Ron, for having me here. And I guess, 2 parts, great questions. I'll sort of intertwine them, I think, in my answer. As you said, I'm a former professional soccer player, grew up here in Southern California in an environment and a time in which, soccer was by no means a smart long-term decision to play professionally, considering there wasn't a league. There was one or many that existed in Europe, but that seemed a long way away without much exposure. So I was really someone who, over the course of my career, although I played many, many sports as a youth and loved them all and was quite good at them, kind of fell in love with soccer quite late, was always kind of struggling to find a way to bridge the technical gap in the sense that I was a very good athlete, but as the game was getting faster and more technical, I could see and understand that gap and struggle to find a way to improve that kind of individually. When I got to college, I stumbled upon this concept of training with a tennis ball, which started by throwing a ball against a wall. It then evolved into a tennis ball machine, and ultimately thousands and thousands of reps that really progressed my career. I would go on to kind of be drafted into the MLS in its initial year. And from there, really, my career started to accelerate. I was someone who never played on any youth national teams at all to quickly becoming a star in the MLS, an all-star, and then on to the full national team. Really all because of this new training kind of concept that I had created. Fast forward a 15-year career that was 10 years abroad in the UK, the Premier League. I played in 2 World Cups, the MLS as well. And literally the day I retired, began working on taking this tennis ball training concept and making it kind of more soccer specific. So I definitely wouldn't recommend immediately retiring and trying to turn inventor and then entrepreneur and all of these things without any sort of real job in place, because it definitely takes a long time and a lot of capital. And to answer the first part of your question, here we are 16 years later. We raised over 200 million in capital. We have over 40 centers in the US, 2 real sides of the business, the soccer side, which are soccer centers that offer youth programs for kids, TOCA training, which is our core differentiated product, as well as adult leagues. And then obviously TOCA Social, which is a newer business that we're really excited about, which has sort of become the world's first kind of soccer entertainment concept, if you will. But together, I think both really kind of extending the lifetime value of what a soccer player or a soccer fan can be, as well as introducing new ways to engage with the sport, which I'm really passionate about.
So many jumping off points in that answer that I could latch on to. Like we can start at the end, TOCA Social, and we're going to cover that, let's say, in a bit, but that idea of bringing what we call competitive socialization. So you're being social, you're playing a sport while engaging, with a drink and having a bit of food, maybe with your family, with your friends. And I know you have a new launch of that, or a new venue that's launching there. And I want to spend some time there because that's part of a macro trend that we're seeing. But I want to stick with the origin of the platform. I find it so interesting that you're actually like this tech-enabled training thing that you're talking about, which sounds like you're going to build for yourself. And that's what you then brought to the market. How quick did you find that the market was willing to accept this kind of product, especially in the US where soccer is
Right.
not the most popular sport?
Yeah. Well, I think it sort of has 2 sides to it. I think one side was I had been using this for 15 years, so there was no doubt in my mind, and I was literally living proof that this worked, right? And as I said, I grew up
Sorry,
playing.
did you have other pro athletes that you were kind of sharing this with? Like, was it just you alone, or did you have a
Yeah.
little group?
No, in fact, there were a couple of other pros, but I was actually a little embarrassed about what I was doing, to be perfectly honest.
Oh.
And it was it was twofold. Number one, it was a very odd concept to be standing in front of a tennis ball machine without a tennis racket, and controlling tennis balls in all these different ways, and at the same time, it was also a very kind of a competitive differentiator for me. So I felt like I had my own kind of secret weapon, if you will. So but I think between the two things, I kept it, quite private for a long time, but quickly realized, when I was in the UK that this made so much sense. As I said, I grew up playing so many other sports, and there was a reason why there was a tennis ball machine in tennis, or a driving range in golf, or a batting cage in baseball, or all of these things. And when I looked at soccer, it was, if you really kind of just stripped down and looked at from a team training perspective, it was really kind of inefficient in the sense that it doesn't really address a player's individual technical needs if they need support in some areas. As an example, if I was to go out and train with a team, I would generally just play to my strengths. As a left footer, I'm not going to spend most of the time working on my right foot because it needs work, because I don't want to give the ball away in possession and have my teammates, upset at me the whole practice. So you sort of compound the problems in this team setting. And there's often not a lot of time to catch up if those skills weren't where they needed to be at the right age. You were sort of trying to play catch up, and it wasn't really an inefficient way to do it. So, for me, that quickly became the opportunity. Now, bringing it to the public definitely was met with a lot of criticism. I would say, roughly, 100%, not quite, but 98% of all of my teammates and anyone else I was trying to convince that this was the future were worried about their own kind of reputational risk of backing someone with such an obscure concept, that although they wished me the best and thought it was a great concept, didn't necessarily want to join in or be part of that. But I don't think that's uncommon either. I think it's almost human nature in some way to necessarily want to take risk. But for me, there was never a doubt for those two reasons. Number one, it existed in all these other sports, and really because I was living proof.
That's the burden of the maverick, right? When you're plowing that lone furrow, not everybody's like, look at this crazy guy, until they realize that the crazy guy was talking sense the whole time. And that sounds like your journey is kind of reflective of all that, because, and you touched upon this earlier, like you raised 200 million in capital, like from A-list, like Harry Kane's an investor, apart from various other institutional checks and A-list investors that you've had along that journey. Talk to me about the journey itself. How's the product evolved? Like now we've got to a point, let's say, hey, okay, now there is something here. There is a product market fit. This is actively benefiting kids and athletes at whatever level to train. Now, where does the product go? Is it just more facilities? I just expand this. You've adapted formats, which is creating the social product. Like, how does that evolve in your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, listen, the technology is a huge part of the product and the experience we deliver. At the same time, I think we're very focused on, you know, good technology really, if done well, kind of falls to the background and very much creates a great experience in the background, but isn't necessarily what people talk about or want to talk about. And I think we worked really hard to leverage the technology to do exactly that, but at the same time really try and create a people business, right? And create fantastic guest experiences and customer service while really leveraging fantastic technology to be able to deliver those experiences. And as an example, we started with, on the TOCA training side, a very basic ball machine. And at that point it really, this was kind of 2014. As I'm developing this, smartphones were just becoming really smart. So I really liked the idea of trying to use my cell phone to be able to control this ball machine, if you will. And that really kind of opened the door in the sense that this no longer became just one way communication, right? Yes, it was a remote, but I was also now starting to get feedback on what was being delivered, how many, where. So from there really started this down this pathway of two things. Number one, trying to create data that had never really existed in soccer before. As an example, if somebody said, how good is a player technically, I think almost really to this day, you'd still kind of say, without TOCA, they either have a good first touch or they don't, right? And what does that really mean? 100 different ways I need to be able to control the ball, and I might be excellent at 50 of them, but a lot of these other areas still require work. And because we can now consistently deliver a ball in any capacity that a soccer player may want, it allows us to then measure that, right? Because we have now something that's fixed, we can measure things like how long it takes you to control the ball, obviously whether you hit the target. As we added targets over the years, we also developed this awareness component, which was something I didn't have with the tennis ball machine. But again, the goal was to make this much more soccer specific and not just be about repetition, but really be about good quality repetitions that combined both awareness and technical execution, while at the same time benchmarking your progress objectively, which really has never existed. And I think we've managed to accomplish that, and now are really even moving forward into creating much more dynamic training systems in which the actual system itself gets harder or easier based on your success without the input of a trainer. Today we have a trainer who guides you through that full session, but we think there are opportunities for older players who maybe don't need a coach in their session, but want to come in and be able to train on their own, want to be able to maximize their training experience. And now we can, on a ball by ball basis, create a system that gets harder as you get better and, kind of gets easier as or if you struggle. So that's something I'm really excited about here going forward.
And maybe at some point you'll adapt some movement sensors as well into this training, which is what I guess you just reacted to a little bit. The light went on and off in your room.
Yes.
But this is what I find like really, really interesting. I mean, the point about, it's not just about reps, it's about quality reps and how to do that, allow that individualized training I mean, there are different pieces of, let's say, tech in training that we've tested. I mean, I've tested different devices, apps that will do, use AR to give me drills, or like rebounders, which are smart rebounders. But I think TOCA is one of the biggest, feel like kind of OGs of this space a bit, right? You've been there for so
Yeah.
long. As we said, we've gone to speak to the longevity of it, 16 years, and of course your career as a professional. And I want to jump off there for a little bit. And you gave a bit of an intro in a bit of a glimpse when you spoke about it. I'll rattle off your CV as well. 80 plus caps at the international level for the US, played in the Premier League. But my question is, I read somewhere that apparently you tried to take free kicks off David Beckham. He just wouldn't let you. He wouldn't let you take one. Like, my
Yeah.
question is, were you actually were you in the queue? Like, were you behind him? Like, have you got a foot on you there to put in the top corner?
Yeah. I mean, let me first of all be clear. There's a couple of things. Number one, in football, like there's a seniority piece to that is very much respected, and I am also one that that definitely respects that. But I'd also say, although if there were 100 elements of becoming a good footballer, in 99 of them, I was nowhere near, the David Beckhams of the world. But I would say, I could cross the ball as well as probably anybody in the world with my left foot, and obviously that has a big impact on being a good free kick taker as well. So often in training, we'd the day before the game or a couple of days before the game, we'd run through a series of free kick exercises, and there'd be times that I was definitely scoring more free kicks than he was during the
There we go.
training. But the reality was that's very different than a game environment. And as I've always said, he's definitely earned the right to tell me, thanks, Ed, but I got this one, whether it was on a left footed side or the right footed side. And as much as I tried, I often lost that battle. But again, respect the hierarchy, and he's earned the right to be able to do that.
I've had Cricket World Cup winners on this pod, coaches and players. I've had rugby players. I've had NFL pros. I think I had a basketball NBA player as well. I've never had a World Cup football, like somebody who's played at the World Cup, which is you, which is the first for me. And I've certainly never had somebody who's played alongside David Beckham, who, by the way, a little shout out, was my idol growing up. Like, I had the ponytail, I used to wear the 7, United fan, all of that. So I
Nice.
had to sneak in a Beck's question in there. So the fact that you did that is an incredible moment. I'd love to chat with you more about that. But I think there are more interesting things to talk about. Maybe not for me, but I think certainly from the business side of things. Before we continue, a quick word from us at SportsTechX. If you're building, investing, or operating in sports tech, you need to know what's moving in the global ecosystem before anyone else does. SportsTechX's intelligence hub gives you that edge. Over 8,000 companies, investors, events, and programs all in one place. Sign up for free. That's intelligence.sportstechx.com. And be sure to check out the show notes of this episode for a little surprise waiting for you. Now, back to the episode. Talk to me about TOCA Social, because I think and I've mentioned this before, there is this broader trend as a fund at Match Ventures. I've been exploring this a lot, that this combination of, hey, I'm doing something competitive, alcohol may or may not be involved. Like the thing of, I'm just going to a bar to hang out with my buddies, that's dying. I think we're seeing that clearly with the younger generation. Alcohol consumption is on a downward trend. But I also don't want to just hang out. I want to do something. And the trend that Top Golf started, which is, hey, you can go to a driving range. You can do it with buddies. You can do it as an after work thing. You can do it with your family. There are multiple groups that you could bring to this. And that is now happening in multiple sports, right? We're seeing this in tennis. We're seeing this in pool. Formula One, F1 Arcade is a great example. And TOCA Social seems to be that one for football. And I know you've got a few venues. How is that? Again, we talk about the one that's coming up, but is that how you see it? Is that how it's like, hey, you can have a drink, have a bit of food, and then play a bit of game, and it is that kind of competitive socialization element that you're leaning into and bringing your
Yeah.
training tech into that format?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And I will say, the beauty of I think the TOCA social concept is really, it was born out of really the success we were having on the soccer side of the business. Because as much as we'd be spending all of our time focusing on developing young players, all of the trainers at the end of their workday would want to go into the studio and hit volleys and have a volley competition or whatever else. If we had, a young player training, often we'd have their parent who wanted to jump in for the last 5 minutes, or a brother or a sister. So we knew there was this like fantastic engagement with the product and the experience. And because of soccer and how difficult it is and how starved people are of like that one moment in which this half volley comes bouncing perfectly for you that you can strike, or a volley, or kind of bending a ball with the side of your foot, top bends. And now to be able to have that experience or that opportunity kind of on demand just made so much sense, right? And I think that it was really that concept combined with a lot of really talented people that were brought in to execute on this. I don't think it's a coincidence that the former chairman of Topgolf is also the co-chairman of our board. So we very much saw this as an opportunity. I think you're exactly right. The competitive socializing thing is real, and obviously there's a lot of soccer fans around the world. So for us, we've been very successful in the UK. We've had 3 centers open there. This is our first one in North America, which we're extremely excited about for lots of reasons that you can probably imagine. But we feel like both of these businesses, they create a flywheel. Our soccer fans should be social fans. Our social fans will ultimately be soccer fans as well. For us, this is a real defining moment in the organization because we have 4 soccer centers already in Dallas, nearby what will be our first TOCA Social venue. So to see both centers and this flywheel effect taking place for the first time is really what we see as the future for this business.
For listeners, I'm putting up my hand as a diehard football/soccer fan. The one thing I'm surprised with myself by is like I haven't tried one of your facilities in the UK. I remember the last time I was in London, I went to check out the F1 arcade facility, and it was
Yep.
packed, and I really saw the buzz. So and I know I've done this at Pool House, so I have to go check out a TOCA Social in the UK. And best luck, of course, with the one that you got coming up in Dallas and all the other facilities that will spring off it, which I have no doubt about. Do you want to pick your brain on just as a macro perspective on sports tech in general and the macro trends that you see in this industry? Again, as somebody who's been in that space, apart from your professional athlete hat, you've been in this space also for such a long time, far longer than most companies that I know. Like I said, 16 years is a long time. You've seen it evolve. What are the trends that you're seeing now that you're, especially competitive socialization is clearly one, for example, that you're jumping on? What are the
Yep.
other 2 or 3 trends that you're like, hey, that's something to watch out for, whether as an investor or even as a young entrepreneur, that they can maybe place a bet on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, for me, I think at least here in North America, there's a few things that are definitely happening in a big way, right? There's a tremendous amount of investment now going into youth sports, right? Youth sports was always popular growing up, but it was fairly fragmented and somewhat disorganized in terms of how it was managed and run. And and it's not just soccer, but there's a ton of investment going into youth sports, which I think is a big opportunity for us. I think other ones is that tech and really performance tech, if you will, is moving kind of downstream for the first time, right? So particularly in football, you would have a lot of wonderful tech that was available, but it was really it was expensive and it was only available at the highest level, right? So if you wanted anything other than just kind of pretty simple biometric data that you can get from for any reason, or any kind of like physiological data, which didn't necessarily translate to whether I'm a good soccer player or not. There wasn't much there, and I think and it's not just TOCA. You're starting to see more and more of that tech kind of work its way downstream into the masses. And if you kind of, as the sports pyramid, there's a huge opportunity there at the bottom in terms of starting to implement some of that tech into kind of the lower levels of a sport. And I'd probably say the third area is continuing to lean into the fandom side of the game. And really at the moment with TOCA Social, we're kind of locked in with the experiential fandom. But I would say just more broadly, people are realizing that there's more ways to engage with a sport than just playing it or watching it, right? And I think that used to be, listen, that's all there was, right? You could either go to a football match, watch it on TV, or try and play in a Sunday league. But that was really the only thing that existed for adults. And I think people are realizing that that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right? And that paradigm is very much shifting, so that lifetime customer value, or that relationship to this sport can be strong and can be longer as a result of some of these products. And we very much want to be part of that ecosystem.
I'll especially jump in on the second point that you mentioned and do a little plug for our fund. As Ventures believe 100% in that thesis that there is a consumer product which will sit with every kid, every amateur player, whoever who wants to get better at their sport for each sport. So, for example, we've made investments in Player Maker, in football,
Yep.
which you probably know, and Oliver is a portfolio company, SIQ in the smart basketball, Curve, smart skiing, got a fitness product as well. So we've made multiple bets on that consumer product side of like smart tech, and we're seeing that trend of these are the best Christmas products. Like Christmas
Yep.
season, festive holiday season, the kid gets, their little new football tracker thing, $100, $200, like in that kind of price range as well. That market is really flying. So great to hear you say that as well. Like that's one area we've been betting on as well.
Yeah, I think you guys will do very well. One thing we've learned is for sure, from a discretionary income standpoint, one of the last things you're going to give up on is the spend on your kids. And
Yeah.
certainly if you believe that they have potential, I'm a huge believer in sports no matter what. I know every parent wants their child to become a collegiate athlete or a professional or whatever else. But outside of all of that, just being able to compete in team sports and all that sports bring from a development standpoint, I think is worth every penny any parent could ever spend. But again, that's my view, and I'm a recipient of those benefits.
Two things, Eddie. First, I'm going to use that quote and pass it on to our LPs and say, listen, Eddie also agrees. So I'll use that one. And the second one, part B, what you said, 100% as a dad to a 4-year-old. Well, she'll be 4 in like barely a month. 100%. Like it's one of the things that I want to do for my daughter is like get her into sport as much as possible because I kind of work in the industry to get her out almost in some ways, let her use it. Listen, if she doesn't want to play sport and she wants to do other stuff, that's fine. But like she'll play sport whether she's good at it or not. Like at some level, just
Right.
for all the learnings that you talked about, which
Absolutely.
I fully believe in as well. Eddie, looking forward, talk to me about what's coming up at TOCA Football, at TOCA Social, the next 12, 18 months. Of course, you've got the Dallas venue with TOCA Social that you're launching. What else can we expect to see from the TOCA Football group in some ways?
Yeah. Well, obviously next week is a big week for us in Dallas with the TOCA Social opening. I'd say more broadly, this year is also a special one because it's a World Cup year. We often talk about this, but anytime there's a World Cup in whatever nation that is, you get this kind of once in a generation opportunity to the rest of the world is all kind of now, really starting now through the end of the summer, going to have their eyes on the US. And really the talk is about what is, going on in America, as it relates to soccer. Right. And this is just a huge opportunity for us to step into that spot to tell our story. And I think we have a great story to tell, number one. And number two, we've worked really hard in the last couple of years to put ourselves in this position because we believe there's a massive, both domestic and global expansion of both of our businesses. And, this is for us just going to be a really exciting year to be able to kind of secure some of that future opportunities, we believe, as well as develop some new products and spin-offs off the businesses we built. One of the things we're talking about is a hybrid concept of both, a soccer and a social venue, right? We have a lot of requests for individual social boxes to be able to be installed in stadiums or venues or hotels or other places. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and really at this point it's about making sure we kind of stay disciplined on what we can execute and execute well, and what has the opportunity to kind of scale and really take advantage of what we've already kind of created and the tech we can already or currently leverage. For us, I think it's really just about good execution this year. We have more than enough opportunities in front of us, and it's our job to make sure we take full advantage of that.
That's one of the hardest things as a founder, right? To bring that focus and give that strength and confidence of execution. But of course, you've done an incredible job so far. Eddie, I could keep this conversation going, but we both have to let each other go because if I have to give you back your day and I have to go finish mine. My last question before I sign off. Firstly, if anybody wants to reach out to you, you want to, like, is there a call to action? Is there any partnerships, any geographies you're looking opening up? Let's say maybe the TOCA Social or TOCA Football for. Are you hiring? Anything that you want to throw out to our audience?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd just say we a couple of years ago launched a partnership with the MLS. So certainly here domestically, it's not a coincidence that we're actively entering into MLS markets, both on the soccer and the social side of the business. So for us, those are our key regions and areas. But no, I think we're actively in the market for partnerships. We're looking for new investment ideas. We're kind of on the front foot of most of the new tech that's being developed. So we're always available and listening for anything that's out there, but at the same time, as I said, really trying to stay focused on the things we can control in the moment and not trying to get too distracted by the next shiny object.
That's a fair point. So what we'll do is we'll drop a contact, either an email or your LinkedIn in the show notes. If somebody wants to get in touch, I guess they can reach out. So my last question to end the episode, I like to believe we're all sports fans first, but like I said, I don't get it often that I have somebody who's played in the World Cup and played alongside my idol, David Beckham, growing up, all of that. So I'll ask you for two favorite sporting moments. That's where I end. I always ask you for your favorite sporting moment. So I'll ask you for yours, and then I'll ask you for your favorite Beck's sporting moment, or just Beck's moment, if I can do that.
Uh,
Maybe it
Beck's
was a
mo-
free kick competition where you beat him or something, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess from a sporting perspective, and certainly because it's a World Cup year, it's relevant. I think it still goes back to the opportunity to be a part of the team in 2002. Really made it to the quarterfinals, which was the furthest
Huge.
the U.S. team has ever made it, and certainly to play a role and an important role in that process was something I'll always kind of hold dear to my heart. And I'm looking forward to the U.S. kind of surpassing us this year, I hope, but we'll see. The competition gets tougher and tougher every World Cup.
Sorry, quick word on that. How do you rate Potch's team? Like, how do you feel about them going into this year?
Yeah, it's tough. I think the team will definitely benefit from the fact that the World Cup is in the US, right? And every World Cup host nations get a 10 or 15% bump. And I think we'll probably need that. But it's also a really kind of interesting format, right? We're now, 48 teams and different group stages. So I think it's anytime the World Cup is kind of out of, you know, either, you know, really outside of Europe, frankly, it always brings some new surprises. So I'm hoping the US can kind of benefit from some of that uncertainty as well as the home field advantage and really make it work for them. But overall, a bunch of talented guys, far better than we ever were, that's for sure. So I hope they can bring it together when it matters most. And I suppose as it relates to David, I mean everybody knows everything about David, so there's not, I guess, too much that's not public. But what I will say is I've spent enough time with him and traveled enough with him behind the scenes to know that when you're a superstar of that level and a true kind of A-lister, there's so much noise and negativity that is brought your way and thrown at you. And I'll say, although I haven't spent a lot of time around a bunch of A-listers, just I can't imagine there's people that are able to handle those types of situations with as much kind of class and great demeanor as he has. And I think he's just a great example, not only as a father and a human, but and obviously a soccer player, but just a true overall gentleman when he certainly has earned the right to very much not be in some situations.
It's one of those where you don't pick your idols growing up. You fall in love with whoever you want to you copy and stuff. Looking back as I get older, that's a path and a career, as you said. All the comments that you made about somebody who's done so many interesting things, played so many different roles as a professional, on field, off field, and handled it with the way that he has. He really sets like, hey, that was a good role model I picked somehow, and that's a good example to set. Eddie, that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed the conversation. Like I said, we could have kept going, but this is a good place to leave it. So really appreciate your time, learning more about TOCA Football, TOCA Social, and everything else.
Great to meet you, everyone. Take care and good luck.
That's another great episode in the can. See you guys next week. Cheers. That's a wrap on this episode of the SportsTech All-Stars Podcast. If this conversation gave you something, a new angle, a name to follow, a deal to think about, please share it with someone in your network who needs to hear it. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, a quick rating takes a few seconds and helps more people find the show. If you're not on our weekly newsletter yet, fix that at newsletter.sportstechx.com to join 20,000 other sports business leaders. For deeper intel on sports innovation, investment, and where capital is moving in sports, head to sportstechx.com or follow us on socials, on our LinkedIn. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts so that the next conversation finds you. See you in the next one.